We are going to start Zero Carbon City International Forum Part 3 thematic sessions shortly. This is going to be a completely online session. Please wait for a few more moments until we start the session.
Thank you very much for participating the Zero Carbon International City for Zero Carbon City International Forum 2023. So I would like to begin the Part 3 thematic sessions of the forum. So first of all, I would like to introduce our keynote speaker of the Part 3. So our keynote speaker is Ms. Dr. Deborah Roberts, co-chair of Working Group 2 of the IPCC and head of the Sustainable and Resilient City Initiative Unit in East Wing Municipality, Durban, South Africa. So her keynote presentation on the key takeaway from the summary for urban policymakers reports. So Dr. Deborah Roberts, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So thank you very much for this opportunity, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are in the world. It's a real pleasure to be able to talk to you today about the Summary for Urban Policymakers series, which is based on the 3 main assessment reports of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC, as it's currently known, produced during the course of the 6th assessment cycle. For those of you who I don't seem to have control of the slides. So I assume you're controlling the screen there. So for those of you who are not familiar with the IPCC, it was established way back in 1988. It's part of the UN family of organizations. And the purpose of the IPCC is to provide policymakers with an objective source of information about 3 things. Firstly, the causes of human-induced climate change. Secondly, the impacts. And thirdly, and probably most importantly for your discussions here today, the kind of responses that are available in terms of adaptation and mitigation. And this is done through the assessment of the available scientific, technical, and socioeconomic literature. Next slide, please. Now, the IPCC undertakes its work in assessment cycles. We're currently at the tail end of the 6th assessment cycle. It's been the longest cycle for the IPCC. It started in 2015 and will conclude this year. It's certainly been the busiest of all of the cycles. The 3 working groups that are responsible for producing the assessments of the IPCC have produced 3 special reports, and I'm sure the majority of you will know our special report on global warming of 1.5 degrees Celsius. But we've also just completed the 3 big global assessments. Each working group produces an assessment on a particular aspect of climate change. And the key messages from these 6 assessment reports are being incorporated into the synthesis report, which should be available towards the end of this month. Next slide, please. So how does the Summary for Urban Policymakers series relate to the work of the IPCC? Well, the IPCC acknowledges in the context of its own communication strategy that while our primary audience is national level policymakers, there are large numbers of communities and different audiences who are equally interested in the findings of the IPCC. And so in order to make sure that our information is as accessible and available as possible, we're very supportive of the development of derivative products. So these are products based on the assessment reports of the IPCC, but produced by other organizations and communities. And a particularly important derivative product is the Summary for Urban Policymakers series, or SUP series. And that allowed us to look at drawing out the key messages that are relevant to the urban context from the three big assessment reports of the IPCC. And that's really timely because we are an urban species. The bulk of us now live in the world's cities. But it really was an unprecedented effort to prepare the SUP series. In essence, it involved pulling together IPCC authors and scientists in their individual capacity to author the reports, but they did that in conversation with representatives of cities and city networks, also with members of the business community and other key stakeholders. And this allowed us to extract the most meaningful information from the reports in a way that it was well suited to support near-term local action in the world's cities. Next slide, please. Obviously, a initiative this size involves a number of partners. The key engines behind the process was Resilience Rising, an NGO, and the Indian Institute for Human Settlements, which provided the technical support to the process. But there were other partners that provided funding and support during engagement and communication. Next slide, please. This was an important and global conversation. A number of regional and global convenings were held during the development of the Summary for Urban Policymakers. And this really allowed the 60 IPCC authors who were drawn from the three working groups to interact with 25 leaders from 11 international corporations, with 50 city representatives from 46 cities around the world. And that really enriched the conversation and the overall process. Next slide, please. But an important addition too in the development of the Summary for Urban Policymakers was the involvement of the 6 co-chairs of the IPCC. In the IPCC, each of the working groups is led by 2 co-chairs, one from the Global North and one from the Global South. And all 6 of them, again in their individual capacities, acted as review editors, so providing quality control, ensuring that the science that's represented in the SUP series is the same science that's represented in the main assessment reports of the IPCC. Next slide, please. So let's look at the SUP series. There are 3 volumes. The first of the volumes talks to us about the physical changes in the climate system and the impacts for cities and urban areas. Volumes 2 and 3 are significant because they're the so what volumes. So what do these changes in the physical climate mean in terms of impacts on human societies, on natural ecosystems? What does it mean for the vulnerability of those human and natural systems? And importantly, how can we respond from an adaptation point of view? And that material is contained in the second volume of the SUP. The third volume of the SUP also contains response guidance because it talks to us about the mitigation opportunities that are available at the urban and city level. Next slide, please. So let's look at some of the highlights to emerge from the SUP series. Next slide, please. A really important message that has emerged from the 6th assessment cycle of the IPCC is that we need to stop thinking in silos and we need to start thinking in systems. And that really does very much apply to the urban world, which is very connected. As I've said before, the majority of us live in the world's cities, some 4.2 billion people, but those cities and urban areas don't exist in a vacuum. The societies, the cultures, the economy, the infrastructure doesn't exist by itself. It's very much interconnected with the climate system and the natural ecosystems that surround and, in fact, inhabit our cities. And so it makes logical sense that these 3 systems, human, social, climate, and natural, are all interconnected. Then a change in one system is definitely going to impact the other systems. Next slide, please. And it's very clear from the work that the IPCC has done and as recorded in the SUP series that the physical climate is changing. The Working Group 1 assessment points us very clearly to the fact that all of the climate change we're experiencing now can be attributed to human activity. So the climate change crisis is definitely here. Human-induced climate change is affecting all regions and all systems around the world, but in different ways, depending on where they're located, the level of development, and so on. And we all well know that we're experiencing an increase in intense weather events and climate extremes. Next slide, please. But the assessment also tells us that if we look at the policies that are currently on the books, those and the emissions that will result from the implementation of those policies will in fact cause global warming to exceed 2 degrees Celsius by the middle of the century. Now, that's out of alignment with the ambition that we find in the Paris Agreement, which talks to us about limiting global warming well below 2 degrees. It talks about pursuing 1.5 degrees. But again, our assessment shows us that even with strong emission reductions, the increase in carbon dioxide in the atmosphere will result in global warming exceeding 1.5 degrees in the next 20 years or so. Next slide, please. But this is not a change that lies in the future for many of the world's cities. In fact, we're already seeing cities experiencing increased local temperatures above 2 degrees Celsius. And this is because the land heats faster than the surrounding oceans and because of the location of these cities. So we're seeing these changes, these temperatures over 2 degrees Celsius manifesting in large cities in Asia and some of the small Arctic cities. Next slide, please. So with the change in the physical climate, what are the changes we expect at the urban level? Obviously, an increase in extreme events, and we've all seen the headlines over the last couple of years. This is something that's happening here and now. The increase in heat waves means that we're going to see an exacerbation of heat stress in the world's cities. Next slide, please. We're already experiencing heavy rainfall events. We know that these are going to become more intense and more frequent. And of course, because of the hardened surfaces in urban environments, runoff is amplified in the world's cities. And that leads to flooding of buildings, damage of infrastructure, and impacts on productive land, both outside and inside the city. Next slide, please. Sea level rise combined with storm surge and heavy rainfall events or heavy river flows also means an increase in coastal flooding. We're experiencing that in the present. That will increase in the future with a potential risk for widespread mortality and damage. And this is really important because the pattern of littoralization we see around the world indicates that the bulk of our urbanization is occurring along river valleys or along the coastlines. And so our urban areas are particularly at risk from these impacts because of this process of littoralization of the urban development we see at the global level. Next slide, please. But again, we need to remember that these climate impacts that impact on our urban areas and our cities don't affect everyone in the same way. Those people who are poor and vulnerable, who are socioeconomically marginalized, so for example, people living in informal settlements, feel these impacts disproportionately. So there's a strong consideration around justice and equity that needs to be brought into the climate change response. Next slide, please. Of course, because the climate is changing, our assessment shows us that people are already beginning to adapt, but significant gaps remain. We've seen that cities of various sizes and locations, certainly the 100 assessed, are already engaging with urban adaptation planning. About 170 nations are already incorporating adaptation into their plans and policies. But the problem is there's an enormous adaptation gap. Even if all the planned adaptation that we assessed was implemented, it would be insufficient to address all the risks currently faced by urban areas. So the key message is we can no longer adapt our way out of this problem. Next slide, please. We also need to recognize that there are very real limits to adaptation, and these can be soft limits, for example, the lack of financial resources, or hard limits, such as physiological limits. And the number of limits that we will encounter in our urban areas will increase as the level of global warming increases. So we actually have a very narrow window of opportunity to increase the level of urban adaptation ambition in the world's cities if we're interested in a livable and equitable future. Next slide, please. But of course, the most effective form of adaptation is mitigation, and therefore mitigation at the urban level will have a crucial role to play in determining the future of the global climate. And this is particularly important because if we look at 2020, for example, urban areas were responsible for about 70% of the global share of emissions. So they are a significant player in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. So it really does matter what we do in terms of planning our cities, the structure of the cities, the type of buildings we put into the cities, the power that we use to ensure services are delivered in the cities. So cities will definitely influence greenhouse gas emissions at the global level. Next slide, please. But we need to recognize that cities around the world are very different. Those in the global south are still at an early stage of development. There's a need for a lot of new infrastructure and buildings, while the cities in the global north at a point where they're looking at retrofitting, they're looking at replacing or rebuilding. But both of these processes, either new build or rebuild, if done in an unsustainable way, would mean that we would have unsustainable emissions growth during the 21st century because of urban consumption and production. Next slide, please. But the good news is the assessment does indicate that there are multiple feasible mitigation options available to urban areas around the world in terms of the energy that's used, the urban form that's put in place, the type of buildings and their efficiency, the type of transport and how we power that transport. And when we move towards these low carbon interventions, there are a lot of synergies with the Sustainable Development Goals. And that really allows us to also deal with that issue of equity and justice. Next slide, please. And of course, the more we mitigate, the less we have to adapt. So with enhanced mitigation, we will reduce the likelihood of flooding, reduce the urban heat island impact, and of course, enhance health because of reduced air pollution. Next slide, please. Mitigation also has a variety of developmental spin-offs, for example, potentially creating new green jobs, raising incomes, and reducing inequalities both within and between countries. Next slide, please. But this ambitious level of adaptation and mitigation that we see recorded in the IPCC assessment and in the sub-volumes can only really be facilitated through the simultaneous realization of 5 key system transitions that were identified in the IPCC report. So these are transitions in our urban and infrastructural systems, our energy systems, our industrial systems, our natural systems, and our societal systems. Next slide, please. And there are a variety of enabling conditions which will allow us to advance on these system transitions and ultimately push forward to a much more transformed pattern of development. Next slide, please. And these enabling conditions include things like inclusive governance, strong institutional capacity, political commitment, obviously adequate finance, technology transfer, lifestyle and behavioral change, monitoring and evaluating what we're actually doing to see how effective it is, and paying attention to culture and heritage, because that often provides with a valuable opportunity of increasing adaptive capacity and promoting stronger mitigation. Next slide, please. So the sub-series mirrors the IPCC reports by indicating that urban areas and cities really provide us with a global scale but time-limited opportunity for near-term action on climate-resilient development. And that's a pattern of development that allows us to ambitiously adapt and mitigate climate change while achieving sustainable development and a much more equitable and just society. Next slide, please. And so the message is clear. Cities can be at the forefront of climate change action. They can put in place aggressive and ambitious climate policies that allow us to enhance both human and planetary health. Next slide, please. And there are 2 companion volumes to the sub-series that I should alert you to. There's an action agenda, which incorporates the key messages from the 3 volumes, but also incorporates the views of the city policymakers and practitioners that were collected during the course of the global convenings. The action agenda wasn't drafted by IPCC scientists, so it is distinct from the sub-volumes. There's also an early sub-volume for the special report on 1.5 degrees Celsius that we released in 2018. Next slide, please. So if you're interested in more information about the sub-series or the IPCC, both of these links will help you access websites that contain additional information. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Roberts. It's very informative information, and also it's a little bit difficult. Sometimes it's difficult to grab what the cities, their cities' roles and also what is happening on the cities on the climate change. So I think that report is very informative for all those who want to know more about the climate and then the city actions. Thank you very much for your keynote speech. So yeah, thank you very much. And then we will move on to the next session. So, but the next session is the parallel session. So I would like to ask some housekeeping announcement for the how the parallel session is going on. Thank you very much.
We are going to have two sessions in parallel. One is on decarbonization and resilience, and the other one is decarbonization and digital technology. Regarding the decarbonization and resilience session, if you are going to participate in the session, please stay on. But if you are going to watch decarbonization and digital technology session, please return to the forum website and select decarbonization and digital technology session from that website.
Thank you very much for joining this session. Just wanted to check if you can hear me clearly. I'm assuming you could all see and hear me. So I would like to maybe introduce myself. I'm Jerry Velasquez. I'm the Director of the Division of Mitigation and Adaptation at the Green Climate Fund. Welcome to this session, Session 1-1, Synergies of Decarbonization and Resilience. So this is a very interesting session because it links both the two aspects of climate work, mitigation and adaptation, and linking this to the local level. And I think that we have a range of speakers to share their work with us today. And we will have 7 minutes each, 6 speakers, and I will introduce each one of them. So maybe we should get started. And the first speaker will be Yamaguchi Tomoaki, which is the Director of Digital Promotion Office, Future Creation Division of Tsumagoi Village, who will be speaking today on the visualization of big data. So Yamaguchi-san, over to you.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I'm going to show you my slide. Do you see my slide? No? Without further ado, let me start. How do you do? As was introduced, I'm from Tsumagoi Village, Gunma Prefecture. It seems I can hear the sound following me, so I will try to speak slow. It is a great honor to be invited to this cutting-edge forum, which will form the future of the world. I am not able to brag about our initiatives, but I would like to share with you our decarbonization and resilience initiatives. I will talk about resilience and climate change mitigation initiatives in Tsumagoe Village, Gunma Prefecture. Please bear with me for about 7 minutes. Once again, this is Tsumagoe Village, Gunma Prefecture. This photo is Mount Asama, one of the 100 most famous mountains in Japan. It has a population of about 9,000 and an area of 337 square kilometers. It takes about 2.5 hours by car from Tokyo, and our main industry is cabbage farming. The elevation of the village is around 1,200 meters, and it is a highland area with many tourist facilities such as hot springs and recreational facilities. This is Tsumagoe Village. First, I will talk about our resilience initiatives. The initiatives I'm going to talk about received the Prime Minister's Award in September last year, 2022. As a conclusion, this project enables users to receive both disaster prevention and tourism information through a single SNS account. The open data is stored in fileware, and we have taken on the challenge of creating a scalable smart city that enables a stress-free sharing of disaster prevention and tourism information. Why we took the initiatives in disaster prevention and tourism? This is a background of our challenges. As you can see here, in October 2019, there was typhoon hitting us. The damage was so severe that it cut mountains and changed the flow of rivers. And this is another picture from the same typhoon. And the amount of damage to agriculture was 650 million yen, and the precipitation in one night was 485 millimeters. It was an unprecedented disaster for Tsumagoe Village, which had relatively few disasters. Furthermore, at that time, all information was shared back then on paper and telephone calls between people. The evacuation center and tourists, residents were left in a state of anxiety due to isolation of information. This highlighted the problem. This was a catalyst for challenge to create a smart city that utilizes scalable data, and it is not limited to disaster prevention. Now, here were challenges of tourism in Tsumagoe. Number of tourists plummeted due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Not sure what to do to prepare for with and after COVID-19 pandemic. We had to refrain from holding events. No opportunity to people know about Tsumagoe, but we had time. So we saw this as an opportunity and decided to improve Tsumagoe's original 3 issues while we still had some time. So what we focused on was the ease of use. What do you think about this approach? When you are recommended an app for sightseeing and an app for disaster prevention, how would you feel if you're recommended to use these apps? Would you use a disaster prevention app for a mere 1 or 2 nights trip? We have built a smart city with the aim of creating a system that is easy to use for both providers and users. So the resilience efforts so far have given rise to a new way of thinking in Tsumagoe Village. It is a countermeasure and mitigation against climate change and decarbonization in the first place. As you know, adaptation and mitigation go hand in hand. Adaptation as was mentioned, is possible by rising from failures and challenges. And it was easy for Tsumagoe Village to think about adaptation. But as for mitigation, we honestly did not know what we should do or what we could do at Tsumagoe Village. But adaptation alone was not enough. We wanted to do something else. From such a vague state, we decided to ask for the help of Ministry of the Environment and Gunma Prefectural Government. So we took a fresh look at Tsumagoe with various stakeholders from industry, government, and academia. We try to identify unique to Tsumagoe that would lead to decarbonization. So it's a very busy slide. The slogan is Tsumagoe Village, a village of hope where decarbonized lifestyle can be realized. And it is based on the 3 decarbonization goals of agriculture, livelihood, and tourism. Toward 2050, for example, in order to improve the attractiveness of tourism, and it is important to develop secondary transportation for tourists and improve the means of transportation for residents. From there, we have decided that a shared ride demand cab service can be provided for both sightseeing and everyday life. Sorry, I rushed through my presentation. This is my summary. I believe that decarbonization is urban development for residents and tourists alike. Especially for those who are involved in Tsumagoe Village, how should Tsumagoe Village be? We have been made to think that decarbonization is necessary as a core for that. As a means to achieve this, we need to make good use of DX or smart city. Moving forward, we will drive mitigation and adaptation to create an attractive Tsumagoe Village in the future. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for that, Yamaguchi-san. And I think we will now move on to our next speaker. It will be a video message from Carolina Urrutia, which is the Secretary of the Environment of Bogota in Colombia. If we could play her video. Thank you.
El Panel Intergubernamental de Cambio Climático de las Naciones Unidas, conocido como el IPCC, publicó su 6º reporte en marzo de 2022. Sus conclusiones son claras y contundentes.
El reporte, que reúne el trabajo de miles de científicos a nivel mundial, advierte que las temperaturas del planeta se dispararán en promedio en 3 grados centígrados a menos que se tomen acciones decididas sobre nuestras emisiones. Y aunque 3 grados centígrados suenen a un cambio sutil, hacen falta únicamente 1.5 grados para cambiar de manera drástica el clima de nuestro planeta y sus ecosistemas. Este informe nos dice que, si no reducimos nuestras emisiones en mínimo 43% a 2030, frenar el cambio climático será una tarea casi imposible. El informe es un respaldo a las decisiones que hemos tomado en Bogotá. Las acciones que hemos planteado en nuestro plan de desarrollo, en el plan de ordenamiento territorial, el plan de acción climática y el plan aire están alineadas con lo que el IPCC recomienda. Entre ello, proponemos reducir en un 15% las emisiones de Bogotá a 2024 y en un 50% a 2030. Según este grupo de científicos, las ciudades y las zonas urbanas deberán tomar acciones para reducir la quema de combustibles fósiles en el transporte, como crear ciudades compactas y caminables, además de electrificar los sistemas de movilidad. También recomiendan almacenar toda la contaminación por carbono en la naturaleza, protegiendo los ecosistemas urbanos. Bogotá ha hecho la tarea y ha tomado acciones decididas para frenar el cambio climático y adaptarnos a un clima que ya está cambiando. Estas acciones están alineadas con la alarma que los científicos a nivel mundial les hace a los gobernantes, las empresas y los ciudadanos. Es por esto que, primero, renovamos la flota de transporte público con buses eléctricos. Al final de este año serán 1.485 buses eléctricos limpios que estarán rodando por las calles de Bogotá. Muchos de ellos, que podemos ver hoy en día en las avenidas, nos ayudan no solamente a mitigar el cambio climático, sino a respirar mejor. Segundo, adoptamos el Plan de Ordenamiento Territorial Bogotá Reverdece. Este plan establece los lineamientos para construir la ciudad en los próximos 12 años. Aquí priorizamos las bicicletas, los peatones y el transporte masivo limpio, con 5 líneas de metro, 2 trenes regionales, 7 cables y un sistema de buses cero emisiones. Además, el POT crea las directrices para tener una ciudad de 30 minutos. Así, en el futuro, ningún ciudadano se gastará más de media hora para llegar a su destino de estudio, trabajo u ocio. Esto nos ayudará a reducir nuestra huella de carbono y a estar en línea con el IPCC. Tercero, protegimos y ampliamos la estructura ecológica principal en un 30% en el POT. Reconocemos la importancia de nuestros ecosistemas urbanos y rurales y por eso aclaramos los usos permitidos en cada área natural y elevamos el nivel de protección de las reservas distritales de humedal, aumentando su área en un 20%. Cuarto, expedimos la resolución de compensación de árboles 5x1. Antes, cuando un árbol tenía que ser talado, se debía sembrar otro árbol en compensación. Ahora, atendiendo al llamado urgente del IPCC, la compensación tendrá que ser de por lo menos 5 árboles por cada uno que se deba talar. Así, ayudaremos a mitigar las islas de calor y a tener una ciudad cada vez más verde. Quinto, fortalecimos más de 3.800 huertas urbanas en nuestros primeros 2 años de gobierno, mediante la entrega de sustratos, semillas, herramientas y plántulas. Además, lanzamos los programas Mujeres que Reverdecen, Aprender Haciendo y Sembradoras por la Reactivación, una oportunidad para ofrecer transferencias monetarias condicionadas y empleo a más de 5.000 mujeres en estado de vulnerabilidad, a cambio de su trabajo por la mejora de las áreas verdes de la ciudad. Sexto, estudiamos el riesgo climático a escala local, UPZ por UPZ. Esto nos permite entender cómo el cambio climático afecta nuestro barrio, nuestra ciudad y nos lleva a diseñar estrategias para reducir el riesgo que se asocia a inundaciones, incendios, islas de calor, movimientos en masa y avenidas torrenciales.
Estamos haciendo la tarea. En la Bogotá que estamos construyendo, estamos habilitando la ciudad para que podamos vivir de manera cada vez más sostenible. Una ciudad de proximidades, con un sistema de transporte público masivo limpio, multimodal, con ciclorrutas que atraviesen la ciudad. Pero no todo está en las entidades públicas. Las entidades privadas, las empresas y los ciudadanos y ciudadanas también tienen que hacer la tarea. Por eso la invitación de siempre, cambiar nuestros hábitos. Usar el transporte público, movernos en bicicleta, caminar cada vez que sea posible, separar bien nuestros residuos para que podamos aprovecharlos y disponer de ellos correctamente, tener un consumo responsable de energía. Juntos podemos tomar las decisiones que nos permiten hacerle frente a esta advertencia tan seria que nos hacen los científicos. El panel intergubernamental de cambio climático.
Thank you very much for that. I think there is a growing narrative on the important role of cities in these two presentations so far. Let's move on to our third speaker for this session, which is Beatriz Garcia Monco, who is from Vitoria Gasteiz, an architect in EU Climate Neutrality and Adaptation Mission and Agenda 2030 coordinator in San Sebastian. Vitoria, the floor is yours.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. And I would like first to say thank you to the organizers of this very interesting forum. As I think you will have the manage of my slides, so thank you very much. Next slide, please. In order to get a snapshot of my city and the municipality as a whole, I'd like to introduce briefly some figures and basic facts about our municipality. We are located in northern Spain. Vitoria-Gasteiz is the administrative capital of the Basque Country and is the largest municipality in the region by area. The municipality is organized in 3 rings, the urban city at the center, and the extensive rural area containing 63 small population centers, and the more external ring, where large stands of trees and forests are concentrated. Next slide, please. Here you can see some facts of the city, some numbers as a resume of the city, but I would like to point out some of them. That we have a compact and pedestrian scale city with no metropolitan area more or less 100 households per area in the residential areas, 45 square meters of green space per capita, built surface of about 2,600 hectares, and other facts, as you can see in this slide. With all of this, we can say that we have developed a city that coexists in harmony with their environment. We have been working with a strong political leadership in sustainability since the 90s and received the European Green Capital Award in 2012 and the Global Green City Award in 2019. But we are not here today to talk about decarbonization and synergies. With the project that I'm going to talk to you about, I think we tackled these two issues perfectly. Next slide, please. In 2021, the European Commission launched these 5 missions that you can see in the slides, and Vitoria-Gasteiz submit their application to both of them, the 100 climate neutral and smart cities by 2030 and the adaptation to climate change. And we are very lucky that we have been chosen for both of these missions. The objective of the 100 climate neutral and smart cities by 2030 mission objective or issue is very clear, is to accelerate the decarbonization of these 100 European cities and transform them into lighthouse cities that will lead the other European cities to decarbonization, the whole continent of Europe by 2050. Next slide, please. In April 2022, as you can see in this slide, 100 cities, European cities were elected for this mission. And in Spain, we were 7 cities. You can see them there. It's Barcelona, Valencia, Madrid, Valladolid, Sevilla, Zaragoza, and Vitoria-Gasteiz. We are the smallest of the 7th. And also, to help these cities to take climate action and to reach net zero by 2030, they developed 2 very important synergy things. The first one is at European level, which is Net Zero Cities, a consortium of association, network companies, consultancies, universities, research organizations, etc. And at the Spanish level, the CDS 2030, which is the Spanish Cities Platform for Climate Neutrality. With the help of these platforms and the 6 other Spanish cities, we are now developing the first step of this mission. Next slide, please. This is our Climate City Contract, a 3-part document where our city, Vitoria-Gasteiz, and of course all the other 100 European cities will do it a little bit later, but the Spanish cities are going to be the leader of the Climate City Contract with the Swedish cities. And with this, we will express our compromise with the goal of climate neutrality first. Then we will have to make an action plan describing how we are going to do it. And of course, an investment plan saying how we are going to pay for it. And finally, we got to engage all the stakeholders of the city, region, and country to help us on achieving this goal. This is because we know it's something that we cannot do it alone. We have to do it all together. But I want to point out 2 very important things, that this Climate City Contract is an iterative process, so we have to submit it now to the European Commission, but then we will revise it every 2 years, and that this is a process that we are in a learning as we go process. So this is something that has never been done before, so we have to learn by doing. Next slide, please. In Vitoria-Gasteiz, this is our ambition and this is our compromise. Vitoria-Gasteiz strives to become a carbon neutral, resilient, metabolic efficiency and biodiversity, a city with a vibrating and committed social tissue in a healthy and inclusive environment, embedded in an attractive and prosperous economic system, and of course, committed with the Agenda 2030 in the achievement of the SDGs. Next slide, please. And to do our strategy, first of all, we have to analyze. We have done our GHG set baseline emissions. we have done our research in climate change. We have done our assess in climate change. We also have developed a strategy. We detail our finance projects, implement them, and we have to monitor them. And of course, with the European missions, we will accelerate this process. Next slide, please. And in our city, we detected that these are the 6 main strategy lines that we will have to tackle in order to achieve the climate neutrality by 2030. So we have sustainable energy, urban regeneration and rehabilitation under energy efficiency, sustainable mobility and public space, circular strategy, green infrastructure strategy and carbon footprint offsetting, and of course, data collection and management. Next slide, please. And finally, this is why we can do it all alone. So we can have to engage and create synergy with all the stakeholders in our city and of course in our region and of course in our state. So this is a map that we have done in our city to know which of the stakeholders we have to engage with. And we are now developing a strategy in how we are going to do this. Next slide, please. So thank you very much. Domo arigatou gozaimasu. And it's been an honor to participate in this forum. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. Very clear and also very inspiring presentation. We move ahead with our next presenter, which is Mr. Sukuarcha Midisuren, the NDC National Coordinator, Ministry of Environment and Tourism from Mongolia. Please go ahead. You have the floor.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can see my screen. My name is Sukuarcha, and Suki for short. And I would like to thank for the Ministry of Environment in Japan for giving me the opportunity to speak today. So, little bit about the climate change, what's happening in Mongolia. So the Mongolia is one of the most vulnerable country, the 10th most vulnerable country in the world. So our the annual average warming is twice increased compared with the global average. And then if you see the slides and past 20 years, the natural disaster has been increased dramatically due to the climate change. So in Mongolian government, we have approved our NDC for next 3 years. We have approved our NDC in 2021 until 2025. So the NDC has 2 main directions, which is to improve the policy and legislation, and then to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions, and then also the adaptation. So in 7 sectors, so we do have 24 objectives and then 72 actions in terms of the current NDC action plan. So if you see the screen, and then we have a goal to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions for 22.7% to 2030. So you can see the main sectors, those produce most greenhouse gas emissions in Mongolia, including energy, construction, industry, transportation, agriculture, and then waste sector. So last year, the president of Mongolia, Khurelsukh, announced that by 2050, we are setting the goal of zeroing the gap between greenhouse gas emissions and absorption. So now we are in 2023 that the current NDC will be last in 2025. So, and then from next year, we're also planning to develop our new NDC until 2030. So if you see in terms of the policy and legislation, the government of Mongolia, we have a new renewable policy until 2030, and then that integrated with the Sustainable Development Goals, and then also the NDC to Paris Agreement, which included with the mitigation and adaptation. So to reach our goal to 2030, and we have 5 main directions, including developing the circular economy, and then greenhouse gas mitigation, and also the strengthening national adaptation capacity, and then supporting the developing green financial system, and then last one is waste reduction. So in terms of the financing, and we have a plan to generate green financing and climate finance with state budget, and then government green procurement, and also tax, and then international fund, including, for example, Green Climate Fund and GF and other international sources. And most importantly, the Mongolian government also trying to develop the public and private partnership with the local governments. So we do have some banking sources in terms of the climate finance. And for example, we do have 3 main carbon credit system, which is Clean Development Mechanism, and then also GCM, Joint Credit Mechanism. And thank you for Japan for doing this. And the government of Mongolia, we still want to continue the joint credit mechanism with Japan. And then third one is most important one is voluntary markets in terms of the carbon market. So we implemented and we're implementing the projects in terms of the CDM and also GCM. So I don't want to more in detail, but if you want to have my presentation, I will send it to you after my presentation. And yeah, so what's a general principle is that we need to reach our Paris Agreement commitment to 2030. So we need to demonstrate the projects, and then cannot happen without carbon credit. So most important is that we need to have a legal and then legal and friendly environment for the carbon credit, and also the co-benefits. And most important is there shouldn't be no double counting, and so on. So if you see the screen, we do have the current policy registration in the place for the carbon credit. And then options in Mongolia, we are not ready in terms of the legislation or the institutional framework, but we still have open to bring the investment in terms of the carbon neutral cities and also the carbon market. So the president of Mongolia initiated the Billion Tree campaign, so which is currently running, and in terms of the advocacy effort, and then the standard and registration, and then policy, project development support, and greenhouse gas estimation. So this one is the important slide for the audience, I guess, and then develop the carbon standard, and then also the capacity development. So after the COP27 last year, the government of Mongolia, we are focusing on to create zero carbon city in the three main provinces, except Ulaanbaatar, the capital. So we have a green city initiative, which is really connected to the urban planning. And Erdenet and Hovd and Arkhanga we are focusing on, because those cities are most air polluted cities in Mongolia, except the capital. So what we can do is that our commitment until 2030 is very clear, and we need to successfully implement our NDC implementation. And plus that, we have to focus on improving the legal environment, and then also the formation of financial mechanism and what kind of resource mobilization investment we can use, and then also the introduction of the clean technology, especially for the carbon neutral cities. And also we still need to have develop our capacity building. And then also the last one is develop our carbon market. Once we have the carbon market, it's a good opportunity for to bring the investment from the abroad. So I just want to thank the organizers and for giving me the opportunity to speak. So so on behalf of Mongolia, we are ready to collaborate and with you, and then to create zero carbon cities to improve the air we share, to create the better future for the people and for the planet. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Supracha, for that. We move on to our next speaker, which is Mr. Tateno Soichi, Leader Public-Private Partnership, Weather News Inc. Global Center. Tateno-san, the floor is yours.
Hi, this is Takeno from Weather News Inc. It's good evening from my side. I would like to share some experience about weather information company and climate change adaptation and mitigation. So I would like to quickly cover the origin of Weather News Inc. There was a tragic ship accident in 1970, and our founder, Mr. Ishibashi, has decided to make the weather information to deliver more quickly and exactly. So he has developed the weather information service in Japan, which is very common in Japan and all over the world today. So starting from the shipping, the maritime service, we have expanded the domains to the aviation, road maintenance, railway, and the other transportation, energy, broadcasting, many industries we are covering right now and globally, and especially the maritime service and the energy service and the aviation service is really global. So I have touched about the maritime service, not only the safety management, but also the fuel emission. So we are kind of supporting the ship business with our service and optimizing the routing, so we can help to reduce the CO2 of the ship companies. And also we are supporting with the weather and the climate prediction and forecast. We are helping the retail market, especially the foods. So we are supporting to reduce the food waste and providing the demand forecast from the weather and the climate aspect. Also, we have doing not only the climate change mitigation, but also the adaptation. We're making the original weather forecast with our mobile and the internet users. We call it supporters. And this is kind of unique style of the disaster mitigation activities in the world. So I would like to touch later. So this is the kind of the basic function and the responsibilities of the public sector and the private sector in Japan. We have the legal framework, which is the Meteorological Science Act, and which defines the role and the responsibility of both. The public sector is doing the public service and basic weather forecast and observation. And the private sector has the capability to develop and innovate their forecast or the observation to the specific industries or the customers. So in Japan, this is kind of the role and the responsibilities of each sectors. So again, the public sector make the early warning to the society, and the private sector is distributing that information, official information, to the end users. Then we communicate with customers and business, then feedback to the society. So in this model, Weathernews is trying to adapt to the other nations. This is the example of Thailand. So we are investing the radar and observation network there, and making the dense observation network there, and make the forecast more accurate and reliable. This is the latest technology to detect the specific phenomena, especially the small area, which is our Eagle radar. And this is a BCP project with WMO World Meteorological Organization. We are supporting that disaster mitigation in Asia with this Eagle radar. And also we had a joint project with the UNESCO and supporting the disaster mitigation and the enhanced awareness of the disaster mitigation in Eastern African nations with our AI chatbot system, which is the mobile application through the line, the communication tool. So quickly, I have spoken that our dream is to become the weather information platform of the world, which is not only the providing the information, but also the communicating with the users or citizens to develop and innovate the weather and climate studies under the appropriate mechanism of the PPE and PPP, and also the cutting edge technologies leads to the that innovation with the people living in the world. So thank you very much for this opportunity, and thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Satana. Maybe we go on to our last speaker, and let's see the time available. So next speaker is, I think if we could mute. Our speaker is Sir Colin Kemp, Mississippi River Basin Initiative. Colin.
Yes, good morning or afternoon. Konnichiwa. My name is Colin Kemp. I am the director of the Mississippi City Towns Initiative. We are a creation of 1-3 United States along the 10-state length of the Mississippi River from Minnesota to Louisiana, 5,000 kilometers of way through middle of. We're headquartered in St. Louis, Missouri, right in the middle of North American. And I believe Secretary my slide. Next slide, please. This is leadership and the mayors that comprise executive committee. Currently are at the subnational level. The mayor of Memphis, Tennessee, Jim Strickland, and the mayor of Greenville, Mississippi, Eric Simmons, in our co-chair, and they are assisted by the other mayors that you see there, one for each state along the Mississippi. And there are 10 states that touch the main state of Mississippi, and those mayors are representing each of the 10 states. The Mississippi River Basin, which is a much larger area, that is the total land of North America that is in the 31 state region and 2 Canadian provinces draining in Mississippi River proper. Next slide, please. So the damages and the climate impacts of climate change, our corridor, are significant. And what we are trying to do is address multiple hazards affecting our corridor all at the same time. Named storm, wildfire, tornadic activity, intense heat, droughts, and subsidence and flooding, of course, and all of these three are affecting corridor at rates. The most expensive impacts that we are sustaining right now, have been since 2005, are named storms, drought, and intensity, pretty much in that order. The flooding would be after all of those, most likely. Just to give you an example, the flooding of the most expensive flood that we have sustained on the Mississippi River in the valley itself has come out to about $6.4 billion US, and that flood was in 2019, and that's along the main stem Mississippi River. The drought of 2012 actually cost us $35 billion. The drought of 2022 cost us an additional $20 billion. So you can see that the flooding is quite dwarfed in terms of costs by droughts. We just happen to have more floods than we do droughts so far. Next slide, please. Speaking of drought, this is a comparison between the two droughts that we just sustained in the Mississippi River corridor over the last 10 years. 2012, a 50-year drought. You can see in the red and dark areas the expanse and the intensity of that drought through the United States. So that was basically a very basin level drought. And then you have the current drought that we are climbing out of. That's the drought of 2022. You can see it's a lot less intense, and the red areas, or the worst hit areas, don't cover as big a landscape. But the interesting thing about the 2022 drought was it affected the Mississippi River itself more acutely. The landscape was impacted more in 2012. In 2022, it was actually the river corridor that was impacted more, which is hard to determine from the maps, the drought tracking maps that you see there. But we actually had a lot lower water level in the Mississippi River in 2022 than we did in 2012. And that wasn't just us. You had major river basins throughout the world were affected more than they had been in recorded history in 2022. Some of the largest rivers in Europe were closed. The shipping and the movement was put to a standstill in those rivers because of the hot, dry period that extended through late summer into early winter of 2022. Next slide, please. So what we are doing, our mayors are engaging at the subnational level and then taking that engagement to the global level to discuss what we're doing to mitigate for all of these disasters and climate impacts on the Mississippi River. And the Mississippi plays a unique role in the planet's food supply. The Mississippi River Basin produces 40% of the world's food. We move and produce 96% of United States agricultural grain output. Over 40% of all U.S. agricultural output moves on the Mississippi River. It is the absolute most critical basin, food-producing river basin on the planet. And we bring that message and that leverage point to things like the COPs around the world. We just were in Sharm el-Sheikh in November for COP27. Our first COP was the COP21 in Paris, where eventually over 70 nations worth of river basins would sign our International Food and Water Security Initiative and Agreement. Next slide, please. This is basically a map of the world's major food-producing river basins. The Mississippi River Basin is number one in production and export. And then you have the Also, number one in production is the Yangtze River Valley in China. And then number three in production is the Amazon, Paraná, and La Plata river basins in South America. Those river basins are also number two in export behind us. So what we are working to do is, in cooperation with these other major food producing river basins, is determine projects on the ground at the subnational level and national level where we can deploy ecosystem restoration and natural infrastructure restoration and deployment in order to mitigate the climate impacts that I talked about, especially intense heat, especially droughts, and disastrous named storm events and floods. If we are able to keep these basins whole and their production protected, then we can maintain the planet's food supply and food web. But it's more to it than that. Not only do we have to protect that commodity production and movement, we have to build resilience into the system to weather the ongoing effects of climate change that we're going to be experiencing across the globe well into up to 2100 and beyond. So for us, what that means is increasing the ecological resilience and integrity of the environmental services providing all of this commodity production and fresh water supply, not just for agriculture, but also manufacturing and drinking water, including myself and my whole family drink the water coming out of the Mississippi River, as do 20 million other people in the United States across 50 cities. Next slide, please. So one of the projects that we are working on is to mitigate for climate impacts at scale. This is subnational performance, and that's because the Mississippi River, unlike many of the other rivers that are the major food producing basins of the planet, the Mississippi is, the river itself is all in one country. It's all in the United States. The basin, however, touches into Canada. So you have two Canadian provinces draining into the Mississippi River basin. But the river valley itself is all contained in the US. So in order to perform for that asset, it has to be subnational performance. That is cities and states working together with the US federal government to make this work. What you see there on the slide is regional zones taking place over 8 states, 30 cities. And those zones there are where we are deploying at the most intensity right now new natural infrastructure. Wetlands, marshes, reconnected backwater areas, reconnected floodplain, and forests are all being deployed at scale in those areas that you see there. Why those areas? Those areas were selected from a study that we did with an organization called 2 Degrees Adapt out of Minneapolis. And 2 Degrees Adapt basically studied for us and teased out where the most vulnerable climate areas on the Mississippi River are. These are the areas that needed help the most, were sort of the catch points for most of the climate risk in the entire corridor. Right now, those areas shift over time, of course, but these are the ones experiencing the most vulnerability at this time. And you can tell that those boxed areas also happen to be confluence areas. These are where major river systems in the basin are connecting to the Mississippi River main stem, like the Red River, the Cedar River, in Iowa, and in the Ohio River, the Illinois, the Missouri, and the Arkansas River. Next slide, please. So what's critical here is that we do this at scale. And we do it in such a way where we are able to realize multiple benefits across the landscape. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for that, Colin. I think we're over time. I think we're about 13 minutes over time. So we unfortunately would not be able to do questions and answers. So I would like to briefly, very, very quickly summarize the session. We all realize from the presentation that cities are the front line. Beatrice mentioned that they set the ambition, they set the strategy, and they take the action. Our colleague, Mr. Sokratia from Mongolia, said that even national governments take cities as the driver for their ambition towards low emission and climate resilience in their Green Cities Initiative. More inspiringly, Mr. Yamaguchi from Gunma Prefecture said that adaptation and mitigation and resilience not only deal with climate change, it can also help in improving the economy and improving the well-being of its people, which is, very, very important. We also heard from Tateno-san that climate information is the basis for climate action and decision. And finally, Colin highlighted the fact that nature-based approaches are the best approaches to build climate adaptation and resilience. It was a very interesting and very thoughtful conversation and discussion. We would like to thank all the panelists in this session, and we would like to thank the host for inviting all of us in this session. And we wish all of you a good rest of the day. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, wherever you are. Welcome to our Zero Carbon City International Forum 2023, the Part 3. This is the last thematic session. We have a 1 hour session 2, strengthening the multi-level cooperation. Welcome to our session. We have 2 key questions. How multilateral collaborations, city-to-city collaboration, can encourage subnational governments, communities towards decarbonization. How the international national support to subnational government can be further strengthened. Yeah, I joined the COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, and then I remember the very first day, Mr. Simon Steele, Executive Secretary of the UNFCCC, who kindly gave us the keynote speech at the Part 1. He stressed on that this COP is implementation. This kind of multi-level cooperation is quite important to the strengthen implementation. So we have 5 speakers, and then we'd like to listen to their presentation. I'm very much sorry, but the 7 minutes each. And then we will have the quick discussion. I'm Junichi Fujino from the IGES, one of the co-organizer of this forum, and so then let's get started. So first, I would like to invite Ms. Helen Santiago-Fink, Program Manager of the US ASEAN Smart Cities Partnership. And so she kindly sent us the video. So let's see her video. Thank you very much.
Greetings. My name is Helen Santiago-Fink. I am a climate urbanist, and I currently serve as the program manager for the US ASEAN Smart Cities Partnership. The partnership is an initiative of the US Department of State, and we work across urban sectors to advance urban sustainability, economic circularity, climate resiliency, and improved quality of life of ASEAN residents. We are an initiative of approximately $10 million with over 20 projects within the ASEAN region. Next slide, please. As we move towards a net zero world, addressing social, economic, and environmental challenges, and providing critical services and sustainable infrastructure to cities is vital. Moreover, strengthening multi-level cooperation and securing private sector partnerships are essential to align with the Sustainable Development Goals in a holistic and inclusive manner. Next slide, please. Multi-level governance and transdisciplinary partnerships are fundamental as we collectively aim to promote sustainable and resilient urban systems and advance climate action at the regional, national, and subnational city scales. Areas of opportunity include circular economy, to provide resource recovery and to optimize waste streams. For example, e-waste to capture rare earth minerals and food waste to produce energy, organic fertilizer, and bioplastics. Cooperation for the ecosystems and the infrastructure, such as eco-innovation parks and markets, is vital. Climate finance, to ensure subnational governments and city stakeholders have adequate resources for research and innovation, sustainable, low-carbon infrastructure, and ecological products and services in the marketplace. And nature-based solutions, to ensure provision of cost-effective critical urban services, such as wastewater treatment, and to mitigate urban flooding, urban heat island, reduce air pollution for improved public health, and provide multiple co-benefits. Next slide, please. Smart sustainable cities can reinforce countries' national determined commitments, or NDCs. It is timely to ensure cities have the governance relationships, national and local, and the human and financial and research and innovation resources to implement the policies, programs, and investments for a net zero, low carbon urban development trajectory. The US-ASEAN Smart Cities Partnership works in 10 key pillars to strengthen urban sustainability, climate resiliency, economic circularity across the ASEAN region. Allow me to highlight 3 reinforcing program areas. 1, climate finance and business innovation. 2, circular economy and entrepreneurship. And 3, nature-based solutions for climate action. Next slide, please. The Smart Cities Business Innovation Fund is a subnational climate finance mechanism to catalyze net zero low carbon solutions to address urban challenges. The fund's launch in 2022 demonstrated the unmet market demand for city level financing. It received 72 proposals across ASEAN, totaling over $14 million from small businesses and startups, universities, NGOs, or consortia thereof. The fund is currently financing 6 innovative solutions to address disaster risk reduction and early warning, plastic and e-waste, pollution from transport fleets, and creating sustainable packaging and institutionalizing ecological education and stewardship for a total of $1 million capitalization. Next slide, please. Circular economy is an increasingly important area of focus for governments. The ASEAN Circular Economy Framework is valuable commitment to strengthen this trajectory. Several of the innovative projects under the Smart Cities Business Innovation Fund apply circular economy principles, such as the repurposing of plastic waste into furniture in Laos and the recycling of solar panels and components in Vietnam. Next slide, please. Partnerships are essential to promote and to scale circularity initiatives and to create new supply chains and the necessary infrastructure to support sustainable economic growth, sustainable and responsible use of critical minerals, and to reinforce the mineral security partnership, as well as to meet overall climate targets. We are actively engaged with several partners, including Singapore, Japan, and the Rochester Institute of Technology in advancing circular economy in ASEAN, and very much welcome new partnerships. Next slide, please. At COP27 in Egypt, the Biden-Harris administration released the Nature-Based Solutions Roadmap, an outline of strategic recommendations to unlock the full potential of nature-based solutions to address climate change, biodiversity loss, and inequity. To optimize the multifunctionality of nature and of urban ecosystems, the Smart Cities Partnership is developing programming on nature-based solutions to support ASEAN cities. Currently, our water program is working with Vientiane, Laos to explore opportunities with constructed wetlands to reinforce wastewater treatment systems. Biopac, our Smart Cities Business Innovation awardee in Indonesia, is using seaweed to replace plastic for sustainable packaging. We welcome partnerships in this area to fully optimize the potential of nature-based solutions for urban sustainability, innovation, and climate action. Next slide, please. Moving forward, cities and national governments must work together and with multi-sectoral partners to advance and implement their climate agendas and tangible commitments towards urban sustainability and circularity through strengthening innovation, governance structures, and investments, while building capacities to optimize the multifunctionality of natural systems for broad socioeconomic and environmental benefits. Thank you for your attention.
Yeah, thank you very much, Helen San, for sharing the your lesson learned for the US ASEAN Smart Cities Partnership. And then, I'm so surprised that or congratulate the US government launched the nature-based solution roadmap. Because last year there is not only the climate COP but also biodiversity COP15 in Montreal. I was also there, and so the nature-based solution is a kind of the synergy between climate and nature. So thank you very much for sharing the your initiative. Okay, then next I would like to invite the Mr. Akihiro Miyazaki-san from Deputy Director General, Global Environment Department, Japan International Cooperation Agency, JICA. So Miyazaki-san, over to you.
I would like to start my explanation. Do you see my slide? Yes, I see the slide. Yes, would you please start? Are you showing the slide? Next page, please. As you all know, currently at JICA, throughout the world, how do we want to tackle climate change? This is a big topic, and in the near future, the impact on climate change needs to be minimized, and efforts must be made. So we are taking utmost efforts to address this topic. So in tackling the climate change, there are two pillars that we have. First is to promote implementation of Paris Agreement, and the second is core benefit of climate change. With these two pillars, as you can see on the bottom, we want to achieve 1 trillion yen per year, achieve the reduction, or we want to double the adaptation measures. With these main targets, we are conducting our activities. For example, in promoting implementation of Paris Agreement, many countries not necessarily implementing NDC based on scientific rationale. So we need to support the mechanism building. So inventory preparation is the area that the many countries are suffering. So we are assisting this initiative as well. So some examples with regard to this, what I'm going to show. This is an example in Bangkok. In some countries, in the same way, we prepare a master plan to support NDC. And in this Bangkok example, master plan was prepared. And the element needs to be incorporated, which leads to the actual reduction. So public transportation, improvement, as well as system creation, as well as a clearing plan. So comprehensive actions have been taken in this Bangkok example. So another example is a core benefit type of climate actions. This is, I believe, is the most important initiative for us because to developing countries, the benefit of development needs to be delivered, and at the same time, the countermeasures against climate change also need to be taken. So in the area of mitigation, for example, energy and public transportation and forest conservation are the area that we want to contribute to. And in the next page, in the area of adaptation in developing countries, disaster prevention, water and agriculture are very important areas. So we provide assistance in those areas. So in the name of adaptation, climate resilient society is the one that we want to create and we want to be conducive to. Now, allow me to share some examples. First, mitigation, as I explained earlier, public transportation and smooth infrastructure and energy, renewable energy, is a main area, and geothermal power. In those areas, Japan has competitive edge, so we want to promote these areas in mitigation. Now, adaptation measures, as mentioned earlier, we address the disaster prevention area, climate and the weather-related area, the ones that we provide support. So, for JICA, we want to promote assistance in those disaster mitigation. In Africa, agriculture is a main industry in many of the countries, so that the residents can lead climate resistant life. We would like to provide support to agriculture, which takes into consideration of the climate resilience. Next is the forest conservation. This is conducive both in mitigation and adaptation. Currently, satellite data is utilized in this initiative, as well as DX technology. So with the advanced technology, mitigation and adaptation measures are in place so that residents can create a climate resilient society by preserving forest. Now, the actions against climate change cannot be done only by ourselves, so we need partners. This is an example of collaboration with private sector partners to promote climate measures. So together with climate change, in particular, the contribution to environment is very important for us. Therefore, the measures against climate, in particular in promoting measures in cities, we have JICA's Clean City Initiative. So we set agenda in here and we share information. And people would collaborate in this, and the financial mobilization and market creation takes place. So together with private companies and the partners, we want to take measures against the environment as well as climate change. Among them, if you look at the center part, we have C2P2, and I will explain about this in the next slide. This is led by the Ministry of the Environment. In this, how as a team Japan, we want to take climate and environmental actions. So as a part of these initiatives for the benefit of entire Earth, by generating synergy, JICA would like to conduct comprehensive activities, and that would be very important moving forward. And most probably, the Ministry of the Environment is going to communicate about this at the G7. So this is a recap of what I just mentioned in the past. So in promoting projects, we want to work together with partners so that we can think of the benefit to the Earth. And through dialogue, we want to have a platform and share the platform. And in a transparent manner, we want to promote various projects. By promoting these activities, this is same as the goal of the SDGs, but we want to generate benefit to 500 million citizens in 50 countries by 2030. This provides benefits to developing countries, but at the same time, this will bring benefits to global environment at the same time. So together with everyone, we want to make progress in these activities. This concludes my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Miyazaki-san, for sharing the very front runner the activities, and then JICA is world famous organization, and then it's quite great that you promote Clean City Partnership Program together with MOEJ and also a Bangkok City case. I'm also involved with a city-to-city collaboration between Kuala Lumpur City and the Tokyo Metropolitan Government, and nowadays with Saitama City under the MOEJ city-to-city, zero carbon city-to-city the program. And then we are looking for the not only a scenario but also a zero carbon district, like a Japanese decarbonization leading areas, that's Tanso Senko Chiki. So it's quite great to having such multi-level or multi-partnership approach. Thank you so much. Okay, then next I would like to invite Mr. Paul Kroniger. If my pronunciation is not good, I'm sorry, but he's a policy officer, international climate policy and urban development for the Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Climate Action, Germany. So maybe good morning or good, so Paul-san, so over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Fujino. My camera, now it's working. Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Fujino. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, thank you to my Japanese and US colleagues for organizing this third Zero Carbon City International Forum and for giving me the opportunity to speak among this esteemed panel. My name is Paul Kroniger and I work in the German Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Climate Action, and I'm responsible for international climate-friendly urban development there. So, urban climate action in, with, and by our cities is urgently needed to reach our climate and decarbonization targets and to protect our citizens from the worsening impacts of climate change. And this was made really crystal clear earlier in the keynote by Mrs. Deborah Roberts and the summary for urban policymakers reports of the IPCC AR6 series, which Germany was very happy to support. We know that our cities are hubs of economic activity, which, however, also comes with a lion's share, about 2/3 of worldwide carbon emissions. The good news is it is in cities where 90% of emissions can be reduced. This is even more relevant as 70% of the global population will live in cities by 2050. And many cities are already showing extraordinary leadership with bold climate action and massive investments into their sustainable urban infrastructure. But we also know cities can't do it alone. They have authority only over 1/3 of the emissions mitigation potential. The other 2/3 really depend on national government level, and then the cooperation between the different tiers of governments. For effective climate action, we really need to therefore work together. And it's on us national governments and together with local leaders who are also present today to actively collaborate across all levels of government and also enable to operation. So Germany, therefore, we are very highly appreciative that Japan, under its current G7 presidency, is also continuing to place a strong focus on urban and subnational climate action. So it was also very interesting to hear from the Clean City Initiative, the Smart Cities Partnership Program today, and I believe there are great synergy potentials between existing initiatives presented today. So our ministry is very proud to support a range of climate-friendly urban development programs through our International Climate Initiative. And our flagship project, which I'm going to talk about today a little bit, is called Urban Act. It's based in the Asia-Pacific region. Urban Act, Integrated Urban Climate Action for Low Carbon and Resilient Cities. That's the long title. So Urban Act supports the transformation towards low carbon and resilient urban development in 5 countries in the region, as shown here, in India, in the Philippines, in Thailand, in China, and in Indonesia. It's implemented by the German Development Cooperation Agency, GIZ, together with UN ASCAP, USAID, ASPECT, and the universities of Dortmund and Stuttgart from Germany. Please, one slide back. Also with local partners in the 5 countries. Funding is 22.6 million euros, and the project just started last year and is going to run until the end of 2026. So we know cities in the region where the Urban Act project is active, they face similar challenges of rapid and often uncontrolled urbanization, while being faced with the impacts of climate change at the same time. They often lack the appropriate capacities and also financial resources to provide adequate sustainable infrastructure and services, and at the same time promote climate-friendly development pathways. So next slide, please. So Urban Act works through 4 interconnected components. Firstly, it addresses the enabling environment and policy frameworks, such as the NDCs in each country, so that the decision makers on national level can really support cities in their efforts for climate-sensitive urban development, and also to better coordinate across sectors of governments and then, of course, levels of governments. Secondly, the project supports dialogue and cooperation at the regional, at the Asian level. It brings together a regional network of relevant actors, promotes knowledge exchange between cities. This is implemented by UCLG ASPEC and UN ASCAP. Thirdly, the Project Urban Act promotes knowledge transfer and capacities in up to 12 pilot cities. This is really crucial because then lastly, together with the cities, the project develops climate-sensitive urban development plans with underlying budgets and really helps cities to identify concrete project pipelines, and helps these cities also to link up their pipelines to project preparation facilities, such as, for instance, the city's climate finance gap fund or the ADB CDIA project preparation facility, and also financiers such as national and international development banks. So in sum, I really believe that through the multi-level approach, ambitious projects like Urban Act and the ones we've heard about before, have really the power to foster a joint and impactful climate action, and thereby also create the livable cities of the future that we all want to live in. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Paul-san. I forgot to say Guten Morgen. My second language is German, so Dankeschön for your kind presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's quite great to having to you share your very, very best practices in Germany. We Japanese also need to learn from you sometime, but it's quite great to you support the Asian many countries and like together with UNSCAP and then also UCLG ASPAC. I know Bernardia very well, and so yeah, hopefully we will have further collaboration. And thank you very much for your presentation. Okay, so then next I would like to invite the Mr. Ryoichiro Ori, Director of International Cooperation Division, Yokohama City. So Ori-san, over to you. よろしくお願いします。
a major city. This shows the challenges caused by urbanization. About 60 years ago, the photographs are shown accordingly. And from the 1950s to 1960s, there was a significant increase in population, and the city expanded significantly. With that, urban problems have come to the fore. Next page, please. This is a current Yokohama today. Now, the urban problems that we were facing have been resolved one by one. Through these initiatives, the government, companies, and citizens have been able to accumulate know-how as well as knowledge and experience. Here, based on our experience and knowledge, we hope to make a contribution to the achievement of SDG as well as resolving urban problems. 11 years ago, from 2011, a whiteboard initiative has been implemented. It's a public and private initiative to provide support in partnership. It's called the Whiteboard Center. YUSA, Yokohama Urban Solution Alliance, is also playing a central role in resolving the urban problems today. With the Ministry of Education, with the Japanese government, the international organizations that we're really receiving support in pursuing these projects today. Now, as we promote these projects, we are working in partnership with the overseas cities. The first was Cebu of the Philippines, and then Da Nang of Vietnam. And third was Bangkok in Thailand. So we have concluded a memorandum in order to provide urban development as well as decarbonization and dealing with there is information on regarding how we want to move this business going forward from the upstream to downstream. We would like to cover the vision of the city will be shared, master plan, action plan, feasibility studies, as well as surveys that will be conducted. In order to resolve the challenges as a tool, a demonstration project will be conducted and ultimately commercialized in order to resolve the urban challenges. So we have been continuing this effort over the years. This is the example of Da Nang City in Vietnam. As I mentioned earlier, we are resolving many challenges of the urban environment through city-to-city collaboration. The Ministry of Environment is providing support, and we are working on decarbonization with Da Nang City. In Yokohama, in 2050, carbon neutral declaration was made ahead of other cities in Japan. Therefore, with our partner, Da Nang City, we are aiming to reach carbon neutrality in 2050. So we approached Da Nang City, and last year, Da Nang City has also made a declaration to be carbon neutral in 2050. This was the first city in Vietnam to make this declaration. We are working together in collaboration. As I have already mentioned, with Bangkok, with Thailand, we have also working towards carbon neutrality, which has been declared for 2050. JICA Miyazaki-san has is connected to the climate plan of JICA on the part of Yokohama. We're also cooperating in this area. So there is a continuum in terms of collaboration efforts. This is a project case in Da Nang City. Right-hand side is showing the installation of high efficiency pumps at the water supply facility. And this is using Japanese government funding for the promotion of this project. This is my last slide. We have a whiteboard project, Yokohama Partnership of Resource and Cooperation.
This is information related to this event. Please refer to the QR code for further information if you're interested. That's all. Thank you.
The sharing the best practices as the first city to declare the zero carbon city toward 2050 in Japan. And and the Danan case is quite impressive. And then I believe that is from also IGES like Bao-san or Miho Kamei-san or IGES colleague also worked with you. And then thank you very much for inviting us to the very important project. Thank you so much. Okay, so last but not least, I would like to invite the fifth speakers, Mr. Steve Hubble, Climate Action Manager, Steve Boise at Idaho, USA. And then he kindly sent us a video, so let's watch the video together.
Good morning. I'm Steve Hubble. I'm the Climate Action Manager for the City of Boise, Idaho. It's wonderful to be here with all of you today to share updates about Boise's climate action initiatives. Boise has been active and leading in the state of Idaho to set clean electricity and carbon neutral goals for our community. You can see the slide maps out the timeline of those goals, starting first in our city government operations, and then moving to our community. The goals are ambitious, but yet also achievable. To support the case for climate action locally, Boise developed a climate adaptation assessment to understand exactly what local impacts we could anticipate from climate change that would directly affect our community. We worked to develop this information with professors from top universities in our state. To support the specific identification of our clean electricity and carbon neutral goals, we developed detailed plans to identify the steps necessary and the actions that would need to be taken to achieve both sets of goals. These plans help us identify a work plan, both near-term and long-term, over the time that it will take to achieve them. Our climate action roadmap lays out 7 key priorities for climate action, with some focus on mitigation, like transportation and buildings and energy, and others focused on adaptation and resilience, like water and natural environment. This two-phased approach to climate action is necessary to both have a focus on reducing emissions, but also prepare our community for the changes that we anticipate to come from climate change. Within each priority, there are a number of different opportunities that are identified, and many of these align with ICLEI's high-impact practices. We measure our emissions periodically, both from city government and from our community, to help assess progress and see how we're doing and identify any adjustments that we need to make, celebrate our accomplishments, or hope for improvement where that's applicable. Some of the initiatives that we're working on specifically, a couple here for electric vehicles. This is Boise's first all-electric trash truck. It's something that we're very excited about, that's very visible in our community, and that our community members are very excited for. It's performed well and fuels at a much lower cost than with fossil fuels. Shown here is an electric transit bus that our transit agency uses. And shown here is an electric utility van that we use within our public works operations. In addition to electric vehicles, we've also been working to convert our buildings to all electric that will be powered by clean electricity sources in the future and transitioning away from natural gas as a heating fuel. We're working with our partners at our investor-owned utility to increase the amount of renewable electricity that's generated on the grid and supply our operations and other businesses and residents with clean and renewable power. Boise operates the largest direct-use geothermal system in the United States and the 7th largest in the world. We use this system to provide locally produced and clean and renewable heat to over 6 million square feet of office space in downtown Boise. The geothermal system provides a direct alternative to natural gas for heating, and we are looking to expand and grow the system to new buildings as they are constructed. The city's created a Youth Climate Action Council to allow our high school students who are passionate about climate change to become more involved with our processes. This forum has allowed them to provide input on some of our technical work, as well as express their perspectives through art and poetry, as shown here on the slide. Thanks again for the opportunity to present to you today. I wish you the best of luck with your session and with your climate action initiatives.
Thank you very much, Steve-san, for sharing the very on-the-ground the challenges, and then it's quite amazing. Like your city of the Boise has the Youth Climate Action Council. Yeah, we should learn from you. Yeah, youth is a very important stakeholder, like COP27 and COP26. Many youth are joining, and then encourage us to do the more implementation. So thank you so much. Okay, then now we would like to move to the discussion session. Then we prepare 3 questions. National, international support to cities has been growing recently. How these supports can be synergized and coordinated to maximize benefits? Number 1. Number 2, what can encourage more cities being on a decarbonization pathway? And number 3, what are the key success factors of city-to-city collaboration? How city-to-city collaboration can exceed? So we have 3 online panelists. I would like to invite one by one, and then you can choose any questions you would like to respond. So first, I would like to invite Miyazaki-san. Can you kindly share your comments for any questions? Thank you.
Thank you very much. First of all, on the part of JICA, for climate change measures as well as environmental measures, areas where Japanese experience will be shared in a steadfast manner, so that we can facilitate and transfer to especially to emerging nations, and the conditions as well as culture and conditions will have to be taken into consideration to make the appropriate plan for implementation. That will be the key. In that regard, Japanese experience as well as knowledge and other experience in other countries must also be brought to bear in the appropriate manner, so that effective and efficient projects can be promoted. I think that will be the key as we move forward. And we have to do it in a cost-effective manner. That is of the utmost importance too. In that regard, the intention of the local citizens is very important as well. But business-wise, we have to have the right environment to promote measures against climate change. Building such an environment is also part of our job. In that regard, we will continue to promote our projects.
Important to respect like regional background, culture, and society. Also, how we will have the not expensive, not too much expensive technology solution together with the local citizens, also business side. Yeah, thank you very much for sharing the very important points. Then next, I would like to invite Paul-san, so you can choose any questions and then please share your comment idea.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think I'm going to speak more to the first two questions about how international and national support can best be synergized. And I think, as we've seen today, there really are already so many interesting support projects from different donor nations. Now, I'm talking mostly about support to emerging and developing countries from, for instance, the G7 countries. And I think what we can still do better, despite the abundance of support, is to coordinate better. And I think where we can come together and present what we're doing, but also discuss where we can maybe collaborate on our national and international programs will be quite key to first of all have an overview of all the things that are out there. So I'm really looking forward to that happening. And to see what could be follow-up questions so that we can really streamline our support to where it is needed most. And on the other hand, there are already international initiatives such as the Cities Climate Finance Leadership Alliance, CCFLA, for instance, which brings together a lot of different actors from countries to development banks to city networks, to really sort of synergize and help cities find ways to access climate finance, because finance is still often one of the biggest challenges for the local level, because they cannot raise taxes themselves. They are dependent on national governments. So we need to make it easier for cities to really tap into the available funding that is in many cases already there, but they just don't know how to get there. And also these initiatives are often not linked. Yeah. So for instance, project preparation support is not linked then to financing programs and so on. So initiatives such as CCFLA can really help there. And also, how can we encourage more cities to be on a decarbonization pathway? Again, I think as national governments, we need to incentivize climate action. We need to link it to a sustainable urban development. Sustainable urban development, I think, is a priority for any city and any mayor. And if it's linked and we can show that climate-friendly development will make the city also more livable and more inclusive, I think that will be a good incentive to then focus more. And that needs to come with the support from the national level and the financial support as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul-san. So yeah, it's quite important to having kind of donor coordination, always. And then from the national or international level. And also, it's quite, so tomorrow there is a mayor's session, and then a ministerial session will be held April or May. And so, it's also important. And then finance, we need the enough amount of finance to scale up. And so, we also need to share the not so expensive technology, but we need we prepare some amount of finance, otherwise no scale up. So thank you so much. Okay, then I would like to invite the last but not least, Ori-san from Yokohama City. So you can choose any question.
Well, from my part, I would like to talk about how we can strengthen city-to-city collaboration. What we have at the base is city-to-city cooperation. During the pandemic, it was limited to online, but now we can have in-person exchange as well. We should establish a relationship of trust in order to facilitate communication. There are 2 points I would like to further add. Municipalities cannot resolve all the problems at the national level. Nation-to-nation initiatives will be required as well. We need national government support as well, so that city-to-city collaboration can be strengthened as well, and we can facilitate the promotion of projects, and not just government, but ADB, JICA, World Bank, international organizations. Engagement and support is also required. Next is B2B. Companies should also work together to resolve specific challenges. Once we have all these pieces in place, we can have a stronger city-to-city collaboration. We will have a better chance of resolving the problems before us. Therefore, that is how collaboration must be strengthened so that we can facilitate this effort going forward. Thank you.
You are like a lesson learned from us, the front runner city. Yeah, it's quite important to having trust each other first. Yeah, it's necessary. Also have how to city invite like a G2G or a C2C or citizen to citizen or also B2B. Yeah, business is the key to having the solution toward 2030 or 2050. Otherwise, nothing happens. So yeah, I would like to have other lesson learned from Yokohama City or any other Japanese city together with the Asia Pacific. Yeah, thank you very much for sharing. A very important lesson learned. Okay, I think time is almost over, so I'm very much sorry to say, but this discussion session will be finalized, and then I will do the summarize this session just in 1-2 minutes. Yeah, thank you very much, Paul-san from Germany, also Ori-san, Yokohama City, and Miyazaki-san, JICA, maybe Tokyo headquarters or anywhere. So thank you for joining this panel. Okay, from my side, summary of this session. First, I'm very much sorry for there is a technical problem, and so we cannot show the full screen of the Steve San's video. I think the our secretariat will post the full scale of the video on our website, so then please check it later. From the summary, yeah. First, I may say the whole for having the collaboration for the cities in Asia Pacific or the national level, we need the good collaboration among G7 countries to how to support together. Maybe for Asia Pacific, Japan should lead these kind of initiative. And second thing is like a city-to-city collaboration. So trust is very basic, fundamental, but also like B2B is quite important, as the Ori-san mentioned. So how we will have the like a combination of the like global business, but also local business sometimes to having the best solution for the considering the local condition. And third, maybe the point is that the city can be good to the magnet. So the city you have the like places, and then we can see the solutions. So visibility is quite key. That the Mayor Mahadi of the Kuala Lumpur city always mentioned. So, but for this visibility, we can invite the international organization like a JICA, World Bank, anywhere. Also, the national government, like Germany, environment ministers, or also, of course, Ministry of Environment, Japan. And then, of course, we can having citizen collaboration or B2B or any other. So these kind of players are quite key to having the like a success story. So today, our session title is the strengthening multi-level cooperation, and then it's really important having implementation that the Simon Steele, the secretary, executive secretary of the UNFCCC mentioned at the Egypt. So thank you very much for joining this session, and I very much appreciate the 5 speakers, and then especially Paul-san, Ori-san, Miyazaki-san, who kindly joined this session online, and then I also thank the audience and then also secretariat. So I will back my mic to the secretariat. So thank you very much. Dankeschön. Auf Wiedersehen.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fujino, for your good moderation. And thank you very much for speakers for the last thematic sessions. Then I would like to move on the summary session. So I moderate this. My name is Yatsuka Kataoka from the Institute for Global Environmental Strategies, IGES. And then this session will, moderate or kind of organized by me and also my good friends Togo Uchida from the IGES. So first of all, we will quickly summarize today's discussion. Silly. Oops. Okay, silly. All right. Could you wait for a moment for the something wrong with my Zoom? Okay. So the Zero Carbon City International Forum 2023 is organized by the Ministry of Environment Japan and the Office of Special Presidential Envoy for Climate of the United States of America. This forum is organized as an action under the Global Subnational Zero Carbon Promotion Initiative by Japan and United States of America. And then co-organizers is ICLE and IGES. And then this year, in consideration of the G7 presidency of Japan in 2023, so we very special kind of feature is the cooperation with Urban 7 and also the Designated Cities Mayors Association as the secretary leading the organization of the Urban 7 in Japan. So that's as a program. In opening remarks, we have, the presence of the State Minister of Environment, the Ms. Yamada, and also the Nina Hajigen, Ambassador Nina Hajigen from US. And also we have, designated, the very distinguished keynote speakers from the UNFCCC, and then the ICLE, and then also the OECD. And then we have, some mayors from high-level sessions and high-level sessions. We have mayors, and then we have a lively discussion in the panel discussions. So, and then we have the other two parts of the forum. The part 2 is the 13th of the high-level seminar on sustainable cities, focusing on the ASEAN perspective, and also part 3 is thematic sessions. So this is kind of the formulation of this program. So having said that, I would like to pass the microphone to Togo to summarize the key points of especially on the part around the opening and high-level sessions.
Thank you, Yatsuka-san. Sorry. Let me give you an outline of what we have discussed in opening and high-level sessions. So the key message coming out from this session is really summarized in this sentence: multi-level governance and actions as a driver to solve global sustainability agenda. This is coming from the recognition that local governments are the custodians of peace and democracy, and an important actor in achieving global goals, carbon neutrality, biodiversity conservation, and the SDGs. And also local governments are the contributor, promoter, and creator of synergies of climate mitigation and other sustainability agenda, such as urban resilience, biodiversity, and circular economy. And in order for local government to truly exercise its potential, we identify that multi-level governance and action is needed in order for global challenges to be addressed. More precisely, to the next page, please. The participants recognize that there are growing cases of collaboration between national and local governments in addressing the global issues such as climate change. And we were introduced by the Japanese government, EU, and also US government on their activities, good practices on multi-level actions that they are actually working on right now. Also, participants recognize that mutual learning of such good practices of multi-level governance and actions are important for elevating effective policies and program. Also, expectations were raised in establishing long-term partnership between and amongst Urban 7, Urban 20, and G7, G20 to facilitate these processes. And also, participants recognize the importance of expanding these multi-level actions beyond G7, G20, and through international initiatives such as SURGE. So this will be the conclusion, summary of the opening and high-level sessions. Thank you very much. Back to you, Yatsuko-san.
Thank you very much, Togo-san, for your good summary. So yes, and then as output from this forum, so we will publish the output documents of this forum, including key points which Togo has just mentioned, and then this draft of the output document will be shared with all speakers, and also we will put on the draft on our official website for the comments. So I would like to ask the active participation to give the comments for the summary of the output documents. So having said that, thank you very much, and then thank you very much for the organizer to give this very, very good, the events. And also thank you very much for the all collaborators. Also, thank you very much for all speakers and moderators. So, and then also the finally, so I would like to thank you for the interpreters and our staff to support this all day long events. So thank you very much, everybody. And then thank you very much to all participants to participate in this meeting. So thank you very much again. And then I hope we can meet again for this kind of opportunities. Thank you very much. I will conclude this meeting. Thank you.
This concludes all the programs of the Zero Carbon City International Forum. As was introduced earlier, for those consent was provided, on the forum website, the material will be shown later on. For those who joined online, thank you very much for joining for a long time.